Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Gabby, and today we're going to be doing some horror book recommendations. Which I'm so excited to make this video because I actually haven't made a horror book recommendations kind of video like this since April of 2021. What the heck? So this is going to be a follow-up to that video. If you're looking for some more horror recommendations, this is part 3. So, you know, if you see something on this list that maybe you have read, you're looking for something more, I do have 2 previous videos that I've done of different horror recommendations, so I'll have them linked down below if you want to check those out. I also recently did, at the end of last year, I did a video that's like my all-time favorite horror books, so I will have that linked down below as well. Before we do jump into today's video, I wanted to say a huge thank you to today's video sponsor, which is a new sponsor on this channel because it's Sunsama. I have recently talked about, you know, trying to get into a better routine with YouTube and things, and also scheduling, like getting myself on a set schedule has been really hard, but Sunsama has been making my life so much easier when it comes to scheduling tasks and getting things done, and actually because of Sunsama, I've been able to be a lot more productive because Sunsama is a daily calendar and task planner that has helped me stay so organized, and I really love the clean and refreshing kind of aesthetic look of it. Like, I'm a really big fan of that. Most of the people who use Sunsama love the idea of deep work, and it's cool because you can set a time for any planned task, like how long you think it's going to take you to complete that task, and then you can compare at the end of the day to how long it actually took you to complete that task, just so you can stay on top of your deadline, set realistic goals for yourself. I really like the way this works though, you know, because they'll have you fill out all of the tasks that you have to get done that day, and then you can drag the different tasks over to the calendar so that you can actually get a realistic look at what your day is going to look like and when you can actually fit those tasks within your day. You can also adjust the time that you think those tasks are going to take you that day, and then it's also nice because any tasks that you don't get done on that day will automatically roll over onto the next day, so they're not forgotten about. It's really cool too because you can set a weekly objective of something that you're trying to focus on that week, and then you can prioritize the tasks that are going to help you complete your weekly objective, which is just another simple yet powerful feature of Sunsama that I really like. I also think it's one of the most thoughtful calendar kind of planning applications that you can use because they'll ask you thoughtful questions at the end of your day. You can do a wrap up and you can kind of talk about like how the day went and what you could have improved upon and what you can do better tomorrow, what obstacles you faced. They also do have all sorts of integrations, so if you use other planning apps like Calendar, Outlook, Gmail, Notion, ClickUp, and so many more, they have integrations so that you can incorporate those calendars through Sunsama, and so you can have all of your tasks and things in one place. I've been using Sunsama for about 2 weeks now, and I can honestly say it really has been such a game changer for my daily routine. I even like getting the reminders, you know, sent to my email, sent to my phone whenever I have something coming up that I need to do. Definitely be sure to check it out. You can get a 14-day free trial when you used the link in my description. I'll also have the link available on the screen. You can test it out for 14 days and see if it's something that helps with your schedule and with your routine. Thank you so much to Sunsama for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get into the horror books, shall we? Alright, so I wanted to start off this list with one of my top favorite horror books that I read last year because it's Near the Bone by Christina Henry. If you still haven't read Near the Bone, I'm not sure what you're doing, but it's amazing. This is something I would definitely recommend, you know, for people that like kind of like monster horror, but when the monster is like really ambiguous and it's kind of more like the fear of like not being able to see what's out there. Like fans of Bird Box maybe, I would absolutely recommend them this. This one is about this woman who's trapped on this mountain. Okay, we're talking major snowy vibes with this, you know, because this is very wintry. I would almost recommend this to read it in the winter, but I do think you can read it at any time of year. But she's stuck on this mountain with her husband, and by the way, side note, her husband is the most toxic, manipulative, abusive piece of shit that you could ever probably read in a book, and I will just warn you that it is tough. This is a tough one to read because of her husband. Like, he is seriously the biggest asshole. But the reason it especially sucks that they're trapped on this mountain together, not only because he's an abusive monster himself, but also because there's like a monster out there in the woods with them on this mountain. They can't see it, but they can hear it. It's spooky, it's creepy, it has good vibes, it's kind of ambiguous. I just love this book. I love everything about it. I've actually read it twice because I just love it so much. Another one of my favorite horror books that I read last year is Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. This was definitely in one of my top faves of last year because this book was absolutely terrifying. If you need a book that is going to absolutely scare the crap out of you. Like if you're looking for something to truly terrify you, I would recommend this one. Just the prologue alone, like just the first chapter prologue like bit of this book is terrifying. I feel like the prologue of this book could be its own short story because of how creepy and effective it is. And yeah, this is just a, you know, horror story about this couple who takes this trip to this cabin that's in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of like a family-owned cabin. Once they're out at this cabin, some creepy ass shit starts happening, you know? It's like they're surrounded by woods when they're at this cabin. They're completely isolated, alone, just out there in the middle of nowhere. And all this creepy shit just starts happening, you know? Like they think they can hear something out there in the woods. They think they can see shadows, like things are happening. And then also just some freaky ass shit is happening with this girl when she sleeps. The, you know, fiance girl in this book. Oof! It is some spooky ass scary shit. Like I was reading this at night and I slept with the lights on because I was absolutely terrified. And I will say, I do think the first half of this book is more solid than the ending. Like I definitely have some issues with the ending of this book. It's not my personal favorite, the way that this book ends, but I still think this book was a 5-star for me personally, and because of the experience I had reading this book, like I cannot deny the fact that this is one of the scariest books that I've ever read. Another book that's like a monster horror that has like wintry vibes is The Shuttering by Anya Alborn, and this one is probably my favorite book that I've read from this author so far. And this book is just, oof, it's so intense. It's like the perfect monster horror book. Like if you're looking for something that will kind of feel like a horror movie, like an action monster horror movie, The Shuttering is amazing. I will admit, you know, this book, it took a minute for me to get into it, you know, because the characters are a little, like they feel a little cringy, a little cheesy at the start of this book, but once you get sucked in, this book is such a wild ride. I also love that the way that this book is told, because you know this book is about these 4 friends, I think it's 4 friends, who go up to this mountain and they're gonna go on this skiing trip, and they have this cabin up there that they always go to. And so we follow the 4 friends as they're going up to this mountain, but then in alternate chapters we kind of get like random people that we don't know seeing this monster and interacting with this monster in like a really creepy like horror movie way. Like I swear this book is written like a horror movie. It's just so cool because it'll be like some random person like leaving their job or just like having a chill day, and then bam, they see the monster and they die in the most brutal way. And it's just so intense and scary and like by the end of this book I was like, my heart was fucking racing because I was like so stressed out for these characters, and I just genuinely loved everything about this book. Like it was a 5-star, stunning, amazing, beautiful, love to see it. Another one I would recommend is The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon. I will let you know, however, that The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon is still my favorite Jennifer McMahon book, but I think The Drowning Kind is also very fantastic. And if you're unfamiliar with Jennifer McMahon and her writing style, she usually writes horror books that kind of feel like horror books that also are kind of like historical fiction. She'll have a timeline that takes place in the past, like for this one, it takes place partially in 1929, and then we also have one that takes place in the present day, which is probably around 2019. And this book is so interesting, I think, and so unique because it has a lot to do with water. And in the present day chapters, you know, we're following this girl who's coming back to the small town where she grew up in because her sister recently drowned in this pool, and it's like, what the heck? And then in the past chapters in 1929, we're following this woman who desperately wants a baby, and so she goes to this water where like in the town, they say the legend of the town is that like you can go to this water and you can make a wish, but the wish will also curse you in some way. And it is just absolutely fascinating. Like it is so good, so freaking cool. I just really love Jennifer McMahon's writing. I feel like she really writes characters that you care about. She writes really good sister relationships, and I just genuinely get creeped out by the writing. Like her horror writing is really good, really effective. Next horror recommendation that I have for you is Tender as the Flesh, which is very much a horror book, and it's also kind of like a dystopian kind of book because this takes place in a somewhat futuristic world where people are eating human beings. Like cannibalism is like the new norm, and this book is just terrifying. You know, it really is. I feel like this is one of those books that has so much to say about the way that we treat animals and like slaughterhouses and what that would look like if we treated humans the same way, and like if we valued animal lives the same way that we value human lives. Like it's just mind-blowing stuff here. But we follow this man named Marcos in this book, and he runs like a human slaughterhouse. That's like his job. And this book is just all kinds of wild, you know? It's absolutely terrifying, horrifying. It'll probably make you sick to your stomach just because of the subject matter. And I do think this book has one of the most like shocking endings. Like there's so many shocking things about this story just because it's just so hard to imagine a world like this, and it's like, oh my god, like it's disgusting and like visceral and just bleh. But I feel like the ending of this book is especially shocking. Like it was an ending that I had to read like a few times those pages just to fully grasp what I was reading. I would also absolutely recommend A Dowry of Blood. This is one that I wasn't even planning on reading this book. I actually only ended up reading it last year because it got nominated at the Goodreads Choice Awards in the horror category, and I was like, what is this? And so in this book, we're following from the perspective of one of Dracula's brides. And this was such an interesting perspective, and this is just genuinely one of the most beautiful ass books written that I've ever read. Like the writing is absolutely gorgeous. It's a really interesting writing style too, because this is almost written in a kind of like a second person style where she's writing to you as if you are Dracula. Like that's how the book is written, and it's just so unique, so freaking cool. I honestly didn't really think that I could give a shit, you know, about vampires, because to be honest, when it comes to horror, like vampires is probably one of the things I care the least about when it comes to reading horror books. And also, I'm the kind of person that gets a little squeamish when it comes to talking about, you know, sucking blood and like bleh, all that. Like I don't, nope, not me. But this book was so good. It was so well written. It had really interesting characters. I loved the writing style of it, like not just the choice to kind of write it in this almost like second person narrative, but also just the writing itself was stunning. It was beautiful. Like listen to this shit. This is a quote from the book. "You seemed to me a fire burning in the woods. I was drawn in by your enticing smoky darkness, a darkness that still stirs memories of safety, of autumn, of home." Fucking beautiful. It's stunning. Like what? S.T. Gibson really came for our necks with this book, okay? Like highly recommend. I would also highly recommend The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. This is another one of my favorite horror books that I read last year. And in this story, we're following this married couple named Nathan and Maddie. And a long time ago, Nathan lived in this small town with his dad, who was like really abusive and really awful. Find out the news that Nathan's dad has recently passed away. So it's going to be about how he's inheriting the house that his dad left behind for him. And so they're moving back to this small town. And this small town just has all of these like creepy vibes, all of these secrets. There's a lot too that's going on with his son, Oliver. This book reminded me quite a bit of The Shining, just because of the way the father and son relationships are portrayed in this book. You know, it definitely reminded me a lot of The Shining with like the abusive father trope and the fear of passing that trait down to your son. I also think this book will go in a direction that you're probably not expecting. Like it doesn't feel horror to me the entirety of the book. Like it definitely goes in a direction that you might not expect, but I feel like it was in a good way. You know, like it went in a way that I was like, whoa, like this is really interesting. I don't think I've ever read anything like this, and I really enjoyed it. So even though this book is kind of massive, you know, it's a little over 500 pages, I wouldn't let that put you off, because I personally thought this book read so quick. Like I would just devour this book so fast. Another horror novel that I would absolutely recommend is When the Reckoning Comes. This one is a horror novel that I was so mad, first of all, when this didn't get picked in the Goodreads Choice Awards, like top 10 horror books. I was like, how did this not make the top 10? And in this book, we're following this woman who has recently moved away from her small town that she grew up in. But in this story, she's going to be going back to that town because her best friend is getting married. But the awkward thing is that her best friend is getting married on this plantation that's been turned into this like vacation resort. And it's very uncomfortable because all of the staff at this resort are Black people, and they are kind of forced to like perform reenactments of things that have happened there in the past. And there's just lots of spooky and uncomfortable vibes happening in this book. And this is one of those horror books where the feeling of discomfort is strong throughout this entire book. Like it just has the most disturbing, like unsettling vibes throughout most of this story. I also really love though the way that this book was written, because we get flashbacks. Like it kind of goes back and forth in the time period. So we get not only the wedding that's happening in the present day, but we also get flashback chapters to when these characters were younger and when they were first meeting and when they were friends growing up. And so I kind of liked, you know, getting to know these characters. I feel like this is one of those horror books where the author really writes in a way that makes you care a lot about these characters, which I really like in horror. You know, I like caring about the characters so that by the time it gets to the intense, you know, holy shit craziness by the end, you actually care about the fate of these characters and like what happens to them. And I just thought this book was really great because it not only had, you know, the spooky, creepy vibes that you're signing up for, but it also just had some really great social commentary. These last 3 books that I want to recommend to you are all either, you know, novellas or like short story collections or that type of thing. The first one is going to be Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. You might be more familiar with the other cover of this book that was available. This one is actually a collection of it's not only Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, but it's other misfortunes as well. So this is the author's, it is the same short story, but there's also other short stories involved with this collection. But I'm only specifically talking about Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke because holy shit. This is a novella, and the entire novella is so interesting because it's only told through like email messages that these 2 girls have sent back and forth. So we're following this woman who's selling this like apple peeler or something of that nature. It's something that her grandmother owned and that's kind of like special to her, but she really needs the money. So it all starts with this like woman who's selling this apple peeler online, and then this other woman emails her and asks like how much she's willing to sell it for, and that's just kind of how the story begins. And then it just becomes this very wild, I mean, I don't want to spoil anything for you, you know, because this is a novella, so it's only about like 100 pages long is the entire story, but this novella left such an impression on me. It is just one of the most disturbing, like disgusting horror books that I've ever read. Like, it is just really gruesome. There's a lot of like kind of like body horror that's happening in this book that is just so mind-boggling. Like, it is just so like there's a lot of commentary in this book about a certain thing. Again, don't want to spoil it for you. I highly just recommend going in not knowing too much, but also just know that it is disturbing and disgusting, and it'll probably make you like, ugh. It's just gross, you know, but if that's what you look for in horror books, or if you enjoy reading those things like I do, I would highly recommend this one. I think it's so fantastic. I would also highly recommend We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. This is another one that's kind of like a short novella. It's just a little, it's like about 150 pages, because the main premise of this book is that we're following this family and there's a tornado warning, and so they all get into the bathroom in their house, like all get together in the bathroom, lock the door, hunker down, and it's about how this family finds themselves isolated in their bathroom for an extended period of time, and you just kind of follow them as they completely fucking lose their minds. And this book is just insane. This book is just so freaking good, and it's told all from the point of view of their teenage daughter, and I think that was such an interesting choice to have it told from her point of view. Her mom and her dad are literally so toxic, and they just like fight all the time. The dad is like a major kind of alcoholic, and they just have all of these issues, and being isolated in this bathroom for such a long time, oh my god, it was stressful. Like, even I felt like I was isolated, like I was stuck when I was reading it because it was just stressful. And this book was just so good. It was freaking fantastic. I do want to read more books from this author just because I had such a great experience with this one. And then the last horror book that I have to recommend for you today is Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. So in this collection, it is a collection of 10 short stories, and as you can see, I really enjoyed 6 out of the 10 of them. But I think this is an interesting horror recommendation because this book not only has horror vibes, but it also says, you know, it blurs the lines between magical realism, horror, and science fiction. So there are some stories that lean or that feel more kind of science fiction as opposed to horror, or like there are some that feel a bit more fantasy or like magical realism vibes than horror, but the horror in this book is amazing. Like, it's so creepy and so gross. This is another one that I would highly recommend if you are into the weird, gross horror, like the body horror, the stuff that's gonna make you repulsed. My personal favorite short stories in this, like if you're only planning to read a few, I would definitely recommend The Head is the first short story. It's so gross and so creepy, but I love it. There's also The Embodiment is a good one. Snare is a good one. Goodbye My Love. Scars. I think Snare is my personal favorite short story in this whole collection, but honestly, out of all the ones I love, like they're all so good and so unique and just bizarre and different in their own ways. Of course, course, there are a couple of misses for me, you know, because I don't love every single short story in this collection, but I do think it's a solid collection, and this is probably my favorite collection of short stories that I've ever read. Like, this is the most I've ever enjoyed out of a full short story collection. All right, so those are all the different horror book recommendations that I have for you today. I think later this year, I'm probably gonna make another round of like horror book recommendations, just because I do have so many, since I haven't made a recommendation video like this since April of last year. So I think maybe later on this year, like maybe in October or November, I'll make another like part 4 of like horror book recommendations. But I was also considering making a full video just talking about like horror novella recommendations, so like just like the short kind of, either like short stories or like short novella kind of horror. So let me know if that is something that you would like to see, just because I do think, like I said previously, that horror is one of those genres where it works really well in like a short story format, and I don't think it takes a lot of pages for a horror book to be effective and scary. And so this summer, I do want to make it more of a goal to read more horror novellas, so that I can have a video that's going to be like horror novella recommendations by the end of the year. So let me know if there are any horror novellas that you think I should get to before the end of the year that you would like for me to read and hear my thoughts and possibly recommend in a future video. I would really appreciate any horror recommendations you have in general, whether they're full-length novels or novellas, of course. Let me know all the recs down below. I'm always looking for more horror books to read. And of course, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts if you've read any of these books. Let me know what you think about them. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye!